We're one of the few places in the nation that has that many renewables all within one boundary. So it's pretty cool. It's brilliant, right? Because if you can get the youth hooked, you can influence a whole generation of people. And so when we really look at jobs, I really say, yeah, that's great. And I love that we're employing the community. But I'm more interested, like, are my neighbors employed by the company? And what does my community really look like? Because that's a better indicator
I love
of an
that.
economic picture, right? Geothermal's great, right? Like we have seen in past with traditional geothermal what's possible, and we're starting to unlock and understand what is actually really possible.
All right. Welcome to Geothermal Unleashed, where we'll explore the cutting edge of geothermal energy. I'm Elizabeth Cambry from the Valorec New Energies team. I'm here to help educate and document geothermal's rise in the global energy transition. And I want to give a special thanks to Think Geo Energy. So joining me today is Jen Wakeland, the Strategic Development Director for Beaver County. Today, we're going to talk about the impact that next generation geothermal is having on the community in Beaver County in Utah. So before we dive into the meat of our discussion today, I would like to kick things off by asking you, Jen, if you could provide some background information on your role as a Strategic Development Director for Beaver County.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. Super excited. Always happy to talk about the place that I call home now. I actually came to Beaver County on a whim, very truthfully. I had started my professional career in law enforcement administration, of all things, and got really good at it. Loved training, loved learning, have always been a continual learner. And when I realized that I had gotten pretty good at being a good chief secretary, at administratively running a police department, I started looking for a new challenge. And I thought, well, if I can do administration in the police sector, why can't I do it more largely in the public sector? I saw this job listing for Beaver County for a strategic development director, and I was like, what the heck even is that? What is that title? And really, here in rural Utah, it's a really good indicator for you wear more than one hat. So, strategic development director, I oversee economic development here in Beaver County. I also see tourism. I do the marketing and all of that for Beaver County specifically. And then I also work with the cities. There are 3 cities and towns that are incorporated here in Beaver County. And so I partner with them to work on their specific town agendas for economic development and tourism here in Beaver County. So I do a little bit of everything. I get to oversee the Chamber of Commerce. I get to oversee our education initiatives. I work closely with a school district. If it's anything that is going to grow jobs or bring new people into Beaver County, that's my shtick. So that's kind of how I got here. I saw the listing and thought, that's wild. Let's give it a try. And so here I am a little over 2 years later and just love the job. It is so much fun to partner with the communities and really dig in and figure out what they want, what they like, what they don't like, and see what we can do to bring a little more economic prosperity to the county.
That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to be talking about how geothermal is impacting the economy in Beaver County, but I'm really interested. Before geothermal came in, what was the what were the key industries that individuals were working in?
Yeah. Beaver County is a great place. It's rural Utah. And so, like most of even rural America, agriculture is the prime industry here today. However, we were essentially established because of the mining industry. And so, as people moved west, they found the mineral mountains here and they found very big deposits of ore, lead, copper. And so we've had a really boom and bust modality in the economic
Interesting.
portfolio here in Beaver County. So whether it was mines, we actually had a stint where the railroad came in and we had a huge influx of workers because of the railroad itself, Union Pacific. Milford is a fueling station along Union Pacific's rail lines. And so more recently, we've seen some diversification. We are seeing another uptick in mining, but we've seen a lot of uptick in agriculture and some of the agri-tech models that are coming out. But again, when I started 2 years ago, we had one of the major employers that was agriculturally based basically say that they were scaling back. So you can imagine I'm coming into this job. I don't really have experience in economic development. And my main employer is saying that they're going to scale back all operations.
Why? What was their reasoning?
E- Economic forces. There was some plant closures and some legislation that changed in California for their market dynamics. The cost of grain was through the roof. And it got expensive to raise pigs in Beaver County. They are still in operation, but they are a small fraction of what they once were. And that's very typical of all of the historical industries here in Beaver County up until kind of the current day, right? We've had these big booms. There's a whole town that exists west of Milford, and it's called Frisco. And at its height, it was 6,000 residents. Frisco doesn't have any water. They had to haul water in on horses to get fresh water for the entire town. And that town no longer exists. All that's there is a
Wow.
singular graveyard. Yeah.
Wow.
And
So the bust, everyone moves out.
and they did. They moved on to another mining community. And so you can't blame them, but the people that have stuck here, there's this rich heritage, right? Of like pulling yourself up from your bootstraps, of finding new ways, of looking around you and seeing what's available and seeing what you can do with it. And I think that's been the real key catalyst to some of the growth in the renewable sector. So we actually have 5 different renewable energies here in Beaver County. We have wind farms. And the reason that the wind farms exist is because there was a bunch of high school students who said, it's really windy here. Like, can we do something about it? And sure enough, they worked with a school district and with one of the universities and put together a project. And we now have a wind farm. Solar farms were really a larger segment of the renewable energy sector. Along with those pig farms, we have renewable natural gas. So there's a way you can take the waste products off of the pigs and make renewable natural gas. So we have that production as well. Of course, we have traditional geothermal, and now we have enhanced geothermal, which we're going to get to talk about here in a second, I swear. But then we also have some springs that generate hydropower on the far side of the county.
Wow, I didn't realize it was so robust in the renewable sources. That's
Yeah,
quite fascinating.
we're one of the few places in the nation that has that many renewables all within one boundary. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Okay, so you mentioned conventional geothermal and then this next generation. So let's talk about when did geothermal first come to Beaver County and what was the reaction to it? And
Yeah,
then I want to also hear when did the next generation, when did you geothermal? When did you
yeah.
start hearing about that and how did the county react to that initially?
Sure. So, we often talk about the latest and greatest, the most exciting, which is Furbo. They're the baby really in the room, truthfully. Blundell is probably the first to actually produce energy because of geothermal. But long before Blundell, which was built maybe 40 years ago, long before Blundell, we actually had hot baths here. So we have a place called Mag's Brothel, which was probably about what you can guess it to be back in the old mining days. In that site, you can still see the footings from that establishment. And even into the 80s, kids were sneaking out there and damming up the water and holding the water within the footprint of the building so they could splash around and play. So geothermal is just natural to who we are and our location on the planet, right? On this big blue orb. So we've had geothermal for a long time, but Blundell came in and they said, hey, there's this reservoir here, and we think we can build a power plant. Took them 10 years from start to finish to figure out the reservoir, get the power plant established, and it's been in operation for 40 years. It has been a great employer here in Beaver County, and the residents loved it, right? Because it was something that used the land that otherwise wouldn't really be used. I mean, we do a ton of grazing, and so geothermal doesn't really hamper any grazing or agricultural production, which is great. And so the residents loved it. Shortly after Blundell, we saw a rise of other traditional geothermal productions. We have Enel, we have Cirque, we have a few other operations that do traditional geothermal. And those traditional geothermal producers, even still to this day, will come in and want to add a new well and do some things. So they're still in production. They're still even expanding in Beaver County, which is great. Small operations, right? A couple megawatts per each facility. And, you know, the community loves that kind of small, sustainable growth. We always want jobs, right? We want our kids to
Sure.
come back because there's no university here. So our children leave to go to college, and then if there's no job for them to come back to, they don't. Or if somebody's already taken up working the farm, then they're looking for something else, right? And so these small little developments actually add a couple of jobs at a time, which is great because we're not imploding the housing market, we're not imploding the supermarket, we're not having
Sure.
to really worry about a degradation of our way of life because we have this sudden influx of all these new jobs. Now, that's going to change a little bit here as we start to see the growth with Fervo, right? This project is currently 400 megawatts sold through a power purchase agreement. But that's phase one.
Okay.
And, Fervo is not shy in talking about phase two, phase three, maybe even phase four. And so when we start engaging with the residents, Vervo has been really good to come to the table and say, we want to be your partners here. We believe we have this culture of the way we work. We build things that last. We do what we say we're going to do. And so we want to engage with you and see what that looks like for you as a community because we've seen it done poorly, and we don't want to be that employer in Beaver
Absolutely.
County. And so it's been great, right? They have regular town hall meetings. They are here quarterly talking to all of the governing bodies, the commissioners, the city councils. They hold all kinds of events, and then they attend our local events. So if it's the county fair, if it's Milford recently had their 150th celebration of the town being founded, and they were there, they're a presence. So it's been really amazing to watch this company kind of work with the community to build up because they know that they need to get buy-in from the residents, right? Like
Yes.
having those shareholders and being on the same page really matters and can three times up their efficiency and their productivity and just how successful they are if they have that local buy-in. And so they've been really good to do that, which is great.
Yeah, that's really great that there was a footprint of geothermal prior to Fervo coming in. So was there, I mean, what was the thoughts from the residents? Why did they buy into the fact that this could be an industry with the next generation geothermal that could take off? Did they have to, was there explanation that had to come along with that?
Yeah, there's been a ton of education around it because enhanced geothermal is inherently so different from traditional geothermal. There's been quite a wide swing where we've really had to talk to the residents about, okay, we're using oil and gas industry standards, but we're doing this thing that you're very comfortable and very familiar with. We're just doing it in a slightly different way. And I think the piece between Blundell and between what Fervo is doing really is Forge. So Forge is a project through the University of Utah, and they came out and they said, well, listen, in theory, we should be able to drill these wells, and we should be able to frack the rock between the wells, and we should be able to circulate. We should be able to capture steam. We should be able, we should. Along the way, it's a lot of R&D, right? It's like, what kind of bit works? What kind of, how long does that bit work? How fast can we go? How slow do we have to go? Can we get the technical pieces to match the conditions underground? And so Forge has been a partner here in Beaver County for, I would say, the last 5 years or so. And they've done a really great job of coming out into the community. They actually start with the sixth graders here in county. So
Right.
yep, they attend all of our other events just the same way Fervo does, but they actually come out and they teach specific courses in the sixth grade. And they talk about what is geothermal energy, and they talk about Blundell, and they give the little kids of the county an opportunity to really see and understand what it is they're doing and It's brilliant, right? Because if you can get the youth hooked, you can influence a whole generation of people. Because as a parent, my daughter went through the 6th grade and she came home, she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited. We're gonna get to talk to the people from Forge this year." And I was like, "Oh yeah." She's like, "We're gonna have a project. You're gonna have to help me because I know you know all the things." And I was like, "Well, I don't know all the things. I work with those lovely folks, but let's figure it out what it is." But that 6th grader is getting her 30-something mother excited and her 40-something father excited, which then gives us something to talk about around the table at dinner or talk about on the weekend when we're out hanging out with our families and our friends. And so it's a really cool way to add engagement and education, to help with some of that community buy-in. And it hasn't been flawless, right? Like, people hear
Right.
about fracking and they kind of get nervous, as they like, it's understandable that they get nervous. And so some of that education around what is actually going on with fracking, how does it affect the local seismicity? Because we're a hot place on purpose. There's some fault lines here. The Intermountain West is well known for their very aggressive fault lines. And so that's something else that those children are being taught at an early age in public schools here. And so to be able to marry the science of the two and really create an enthusiasm is very, very interesting. And so, we still, even to this day, we have people who call us, email us, and are a little bit concerned. They're like, "Well, what's going on with this earthquake that happened in Nevada? Like, did we set that off? Did we do something here in Beaver County that triggered that?" And so it takes a lot of time to talk around some of those more delicate pieces. But I think we've found a way to have those conversations. And then Fervo's been really good to talk about how they have a stoplight approach, and so they're really looking at the data. They're really listening to the ground, as it
Yeah.
were, as they move forward and do their thing. So
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I've got a fifth grader, and I'm going into her classroom this winter to talk about geothermal. So I'm 100% on board with targeting the younger ages and having the influence on them.
well, and they make it fun. Like, it's not
Yeah.
just science. They have this whole parody contest, Forge does,
Oh, cool.
where they have the little kids take like their favorite pop culture song or any song and rewrite the lyrics to it to be about geothermal
No
energy.
way.
Yep, and they share it on their website. You can go see it
I'll
on
have
their
to go
social
check that
media,
out.
on their LinkedIn. It's great, and, there's these local kids who are just, like, having fun recreating Taylor Swift songs, and then they win an iPad
That.
from Forge for winning. Like, it's just really cool.
Yeah, that's very creative. I didn't realize they were so involved with the local community. That's
Yeah.
really wonderful to hear. Okay, so for those in, phase one, how have we seen after they've come in and started drilling? Have we seen an impact to the community
Yeah.
yet? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when Fervo first came to the county, they said, "Listen, we're using some typical modeling for job creation. We think it's gonna be 6,000 jobs." And we immediately went, "Oh my God, that's almost the entire population of Beaver County," right? Beaver County is 7,500 residents. Where are all of those people gonna go? And what we didn't understand at the time is it's incremental, right? There are construction jobs there, and those are bid out, and you have certain pieces. And so it's not 6,000 jobs all at once, and it's not going to be 6,000 jobs running the power facilities or the rigs or any of that. It's spread out over time. And so when you look at that, you have to say, okay, well, let's look at the long term jobs, people who are actually going to be working at Fervo and be there for the foreseeable future. And when Fervo came to us, we said, listen, you've got to get some local buy-in. You need to get some of your local folks in those teams so that you have that community credibility, right? And so they listened and they said, okay, well, we have a couple of roles that we can train people into. We understand that we need people who want to work hard with a good work ethic, which that just abounds here in rural Utah, specifically in Beaver County, right? We're tough people and we just like to dig in and do the work. But but they found some of those key people and put them into those jobs. And that's a big community driver. I talk a lot about the fact that economic development directors often want to talk about the number of jobs created. They want to talk about capex spend, and they want to talk about all the crunchy numbery stuff. I'm not that way because I don't come from a traditional background in economic development. I'm looking more at community building. So I talk with the mayor regularly, and we say things like, do we have enough population and enough high paying jobs that we can afford to have a full-time pharmacist in Milford? Because currently we don't, right? It's a part-time pharmacist. And before that, it was people had to go to the hospital on certain days to pick up their medications. And if you couldn't make it happen, you were kind of out of luck until that next rotation when they came back through. So it's important to keep in mind that the capex is great, the total number of jobs created is great, but let's look at the community that we're building around us. Do we have a pharmacist full time on staff that can take care of the medical needs of the community? Are the kids in the community, are their parents doing well enough that they can afford to show lambs at the county fair and then go on to the state fair? This year we had 10 lambs, and maybe next year we'll have 20 because we have created just enough jobs, just enough high quality, good paying jobs that more kids can participate in those kinds of initiatives. Um, and so when we really look at jobs, I really say, yeah, that's great. And I love that we're employing the community, but I'm more interested, like, are my neighbors employed by the company? Did I get new neighbors who moved here for a job with Fervo? Is that new neighbor coaching T-ball? Like, how is that person integrated into my community, and what does my community really look like? Because that's a better indicator
I love
of an
that.
economic picture, right?
That's awesome. So it's not just the jobs that Fervo will be providing, it's the additional auxiliary jobs for the community that will also come. What are other examples? So, you're talking about hiring a full-time pharmacist.
Mhm.
What are other jobs that you foresee growing in the community?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Because I'm a tourism director, I'm always concerned about
Okay.
people coming here because they want a great experience. And I will be honest, Milford, Utah provides such a nostalgic, fun experience. That Main Street corridor is unreal. You can walk down and see buildings from, even before the 1950s with original stained glass in them. It is just nostalgia to a T. And so, there are service sector jobs. Right now, there are 3 restaurants in Milford that are open and operational. That makes it hard on those guys who are doing the construction out there for a couple months at a time, right? They just want a pizza or they just want a sandwich. They want a sandwich shop to go to. We don't have a sandwich shop. We do have a pizza. We have a pizza location. That's one of my 3. But you can see how quickly, if you think about how often you eat out on any given week, and you're out there working a construction job, just giving it your all and really putting a lot of physical labor into it. Some of those comfort items, right, of being able to take a sandwich for your lunch instead of having to find something at a grocery store. Um, so there's some service sector jobs there that are going to come along. There's a couple of boutique hotels that folks can stay at, but we would like to see that grow, right? Even as Fervo's corporate teams come in, or the Department of Energy, when the Department of Energy wants to come in and do a tour, where are they going to stay? Be-
100%.
yeah, because the hotel in Milford is primarily contracted by Union Pacific. So they maybe only have 1 or 2 rooms available for regular public to stay in. So I start thinking, okay, we have all this influx of people that are coming, whether it's construction or not. Where are they going to park their RVs if that's how they've chosen to live here for the time while they're working for a couple of months? So I try to look at things like that. I try to engage in those conversations. And I've had conversations with grocery store representatives. I've had conversations with hoteliers. I've had conversations with restaurant owners. We're really looking at all of the things that we can really are ancillary needs, right? That this small town maybe had at the height with Union Pacific, but have long since left, and how we can bring some of those back. I'm a firm believer that mom and pop shops are where it's at for small towns like Milford. And so I really look at how do we encourage entrepreneurial spirit in Milford so that people can live in their hometown and make a great living and have a very fulfilled life and know that they're part of that community. So we partner with the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity here in Utah. We get something called the Rural County Grant, which is $200,000 a year. And my board and I pretty consistently focus on how we can encourage entrepreneurs, small business owners here in Beaver County. And that's how we spend the vast majority of that money. We could spend it on a lot of things. We could spend it on industrial parks, we could spend it on infrastructure projects, but we really try to push it back to the local business owners or to encourage more business owners to enter the market here.
Oh, that's really interesting. So, have you had other companies that complement what Fervo's doing talk to you about setting up local shops,
Yeah.
things like that?
Here's the crazy part. There's a lot in economic development that you can't talk about until you can talk about it.
Yeah.
And we are just on the cusp of some of that because obviously Fervo is going to produce more than 400 megawatts. We have some very intentional ideas about how we would like to synergize other industries with Fervo because, again, we don't want to be one modality. We don't want to be boom and bust. We want to diversify that economic portfolio so we have less peaks and valleys and more even general gradual raise, right? So there are certain industries in the tech sphere that use a lot of power that we could synergize with Fervo, and we've made some of those connections, and we're looking at some of those. Those are great because they're not huge job creation type industries. There are a few jobs here and there, but they're high paying jobs, which is always great. And so we've looked at that, and with some of those conversations, we're starting to find other people who say, well, my niche is really to help women or moms specifically re-enter the workforce and give them some of the technical skills that they need. And so I say, all right, well, I have a location where we can train these people. Um, let's engage your group and bring your company down and see if you can expand in Beaver County and do some things. There's some really interesting things that can be done with secondary heat that will come along with what Fervo is doing. So it's not all just the energy. There's a lot of agriculture stuff that actually goes along with it, which is perfect for our model, right? Like it that gets to the heart of who we are here in Beaver County and the way we like to live. And so there's lots of interesting diversifications that we are entertaining. And I would just say, like, to anybody who is listening and thinking, well, hey, I need a little bit of power, but I need some heat for some stuff. Give me a call. Let's figure out where we can put you to synergize with Fervo. And then let's figure out what your product is and figure out who else in the county you can synergize with. Really great example. Last year, we recruited an HVAC company, and they
Sure.
build custom HVACs for large scale data centers, casinos. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has large facilities that they custom build these HVAC units for. I said, hey, listen, Fervo, you guys got to talk to my buddies over here at Unitech. And Unitech said, great, we love working with stuff like that. But every other company that comes in is going to need an HVAC unit, right? And so I try to find whoever wants to come here and be part of this crew, because we're not right for everybody, right? Like we're not the right community for everyone. But for those that we're right for, like we want to make sure that you're successful. And so we'll figure out how to synergize you with things that already exist. And if it's not within our county boundaries, we work as part of a larger region. And so there's a lot to offer here. Within I think within a day's trucking, you can get into Idaho, out to Colorado, into California, definitely into Nevada, Arizona, just from where we sit naturally on I-15. And so if we don't have it, we can get you what you need, or we can get you to market pretty quickly because either the rail accesses through us or the interstate accesses through us. So we're really logistically primed for good growth. The other thing I would say is there's a great cargo capacity airport out there in Milford that's just waiting for some development and some growth, and it could really provide an excellent opportunity for people who want to do some things with geothermal or maybe even geothermal adjacent, right? So
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
lots of opportunities.
Yeah, it's so exciting. But what would you say is the biggest challenge that you're facing, um, with the implementation of all of these geothermal projects?
Definitely housing. I mean,
Okay.
I think housing is generally, right, like a challenge across the nation. It's definitely a challenge in the state of Utah. But we have engaged with some key partners and we're working on some housing. The governor has put together some housing initiatives and some funding for communities that really need to start working on workforce housing. And we're one of those. We are doing everything that we can to engage every dollar that the state of Utah and that the federal the feds want to give us. We are looking to build the kinds of homes that folks want to be in, right? We don't have a ton of starter homes here in
Okay.
Beaver County. People typically buy a home and then they stay in that home forever and they just renovate and renovate and renovate because they own the home, right? I think it's a leftover mindset from that boom and bust modality. And so, we need to see a little bit of diversification across the housing market, and we're working on it. So we feel positive that we're going to have some things here within the next, I would say, 2 to 3 years. We'll have quite a bit of growth in the housing market here.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So I want to ask one last question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other counties or regions that are considering geothermal energy as part of their energy mix?
Yeah. I think the key is to find a good community partner. Honestly, it's not a formal private public relationship that Beaver County has with Fervo or with Blundell or with Enel or with Orma. Like none of that is formal. It's not, it doesn't work that way. What we do is we work as shareholders, right? We really hold ourselves accountable to one another. And so if you can find the kind of, company that's led by people that have the same kind of vision about caring for your community, that understand that building something that matters actually matters. um Geothermal's great, right? Like we have seen in past with traditional geothermal what's possible, and we're starting to unlock and understand what is actually really possible. And so it is something that has not been financially always available, but we are turning that corner. And so, great example, Beaver City here in Beaver County, on the other side of the mountain range from where Fervo's located and where most of our geothermal is actually located right now. They have the hydropower plant, and they use that. They're part of a power co-op. And so they use that power to put on their grid and help keep rates really low for everybody who's part of the UAMPS family. And so I think if you're looking to develop out a geothermal project in your area, be mindful of how you can partner that way. Be mindful of who you need to synergize with to really make that equitable, because really we do get a lot of criticism from our local residents about the fact that the power from Fervo is not going on the local grid. The power from Blundell is not on the local grid. The power from the solar is not on the local grid. So we have all these resources, but we're not fueling our homes with it. Okay, yes, that's true. And we are working to engage with our geothermal partners to do some of that, right? We have another project in county called Rototherm, and they are very similar to Fervo, except that they operate a little bit differently. But they came to us and they said, listen, we want to make sure that the first 2, 3 megawatts go locally. So it's more difficult for us to do that, really, to get that transmission to stay local, but we're dedicated to doing that. And so that's one way, right? You can find partners that want to put it on the local grid, but you can also, as an economic development director, as a community leader, as an elected official, you can talk about the fact that we are creating jobs, right? That's employment for somebody who then goes in turn and spends that employment dollar that they've earned in the local economy, at the local grocery store, at Scotty's Diner, at MC Pizza, at, any number of the mom and pop shops in town, right? And so there's more than just, are we putting this energy on our grid? It's a larger ecosystem. And I think sometimes people forget about that a little bit, but it's easy to remind people and to talk about job creation. And there's always going to be naysayers. So I would say, just if you're considering it, if you're looking at it, if you're wanting to develop it, find good partners, keep educating, keep talking, keep thinking about things, keep trying to engage the community, and just really understand that, sometimes there's just crabby people in the world and they're just going to be miserable. But if you're doing your best at night to make sure that you're looking out for the largest portion of the population in mass, right? We're trying to do the most good for the most amount of people. That's a lovely pursuit, right? That's an easy thing to chase and to really keep an eye on.
Well, thank you, Jen. I absolutely love your energy and your passion for this. I'm very impressed by everything that you're doing for Beaver County, and I want to thank you for joining me today. And to all of our listeners, I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Geothermal Unleashed. I hope today's discussion has sparked new insights and deepened your understanding of the geothermal industry's incredible potential. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and let's continue working together to unleash the full potential of geothermal.